In the vicinity of the Burkhan Khaldun Mountain
in Mongolia is a territory known as the Great Taboo. Legend says that there is the secret tomb of the man who created one of the most extensive empires in human history, and that man's name was Genghis Khan. Mongolia, 12th century AD. Temujin was born around 1162. He was to be the heir to Yesugei, the heir of the Kiute Mongols. However, Yesugei was poisoned by the Tartars and died when Temujin was only 9 years old. The tribes were unwilling to be led by a child, so the family was abandoned and reduced to poverty. To make matters worse, they were attacked by the Tayichiuds, whose leader, Targutai Khan, also aspired to be part of the Kiutes. According to legend, Targutai enslaved Temujin, to whom he attached a wooden canque. However, according to legend, the young man managed to kill his guardian and escape, a feat that gained him fame among the Mongols and one which earned him his first loyal followers. Temujin began riding with other warriors. Thanks to that, his fame grew, and he began to surround himself with loyal followers. Also, he made very important alliances, such as the noble Jamucha or Togrul, Khan of the Kiutes, a powerful Turkish Mongolian people. His first big break came when men from the Merkite clan abducted his wife, Borte. Temujin fought and defeated them, gaining enormous fame. When his former close friend Jamucha, who had helped him recover his wife, turned against him, becoming more jealous of his growing ascendancy, most of Jamucha's men moved to Temujin's side. The great warrior warlord of the steppes had just been forged in legend. Years later, Temujin dared to face superior forces led by his blood brother Jamucha. He was triumphant. Temujin thus obtained not only his revenge, but recovered the territories that belonged to his family and the loyalty of the clans, which proclaimed him Khan of all the Mongols. He was now ready for contests greater than the internal struggles of his people. At that time, China was divided into several kingdoms, many of them ruled by dynasties of barbaric origin. The Tayichiuds state of Jijia to the northwest, the northern Jin Empire, the southern Song Empire, the kingdom of Dalai to the southwest. The Jin dynasty was of Jurchen origin, a Tungus people who would later become known as the Manchus. They ruled in northern China and played at allying and dividing the various nomadic peoples on their western border so as to stay safe from invasions. In previous years, they had supported the Tartars. Now, as this group had become too powerful, the Jin joined the Kiutes and the Mongols in destroying the Tartars, who, by the way, had murdered Temujin's father. In 1202, this alliance managed to defeat the Tartars, who became subjected by the victors. Emperor Jin had bestowed honors and high positions to both Temujin and Togrul of the Kiutes, although they gave superiority to Togrul, so that in theory, Temujin became subordinate to him. The following year, 1203, the old alliance between Temujin and Togrul broke down. The latter joined Jamucha, Temujin's former friend, to try to stop Temujin. He feared that he had become too powerful and would dominate them all. However, many tribes under the command of these two allies switched to Temujin's side. Togrul was killed, and the end result was that the Kiutes were absorbed by the Mongols. Jamuchka took refuge with the Naimans, another Turkish people. Temujin also defeated them. There was a great war in the steppes between the peoples and tribes that accepted the sovereignty of Temujin on one hand and all those who wanted to maintain their independence on the other. Remnants of the Kiutes, Naimans, and Tartars, who appointed Jamucha as Gur Khan, the supreme ruler. Temujin was, once again, victorious, and that great steppe war ended definitively in 1206, when Jamucha was taken prisoner by the Mongols, betrayed by his own followers. Temujin strangled him and, by the way, also killed those who had handed him over, reckoning that those who did such a thing were not to be trusted. In that way, he owned all of the eastern steppe. That same year, a meeting of all the tribes was held under the command of Temujin. It was there that he expressed the need for a supreme chief who should be him, and adopted the name Genghis Khan, Ocean King. He also ordered the various peoples to adopt the common name of Mongols, and he spread the Yasa, a strict code by which, from that moment on, the civilian and military life of his subjects would be governed. Thanks to the Yasa, he turned his people into a huge fighting machine. And, having gained absolute power over his own people, he launched himself into the expansion of his dominions, so that one area after another fell under the force of his mighty armies. First,
It was the Oirats, and then the Kyrgyz.
then the Uyghurs. By 1209, he was ready for a larger expansion, the conquest of China. And he began by attacking the Tayichiuds in the kingdom of Yesugei, which he turned into a vassal state that, for years, was a very valuable ally to the Mongols. In 1211, after gathering all of his forces, Genghis Khan set out to conquer the Jin Empire, whose rulers had, in theory, made him a Jin official. He had been given this position after the war against the Tartars. The Jin opposed with tenacious resistance to the Mongol conquest, and then Genghis Khan resorted to the weapon of war that would bring history to life: terror. He did not hesitate in exterminating the inhabitants of entire towns as punishment for opposing him and as a warning to others, so that this conquest cost the lives of millions of people. But even so, that war lasted a long time. Beijing did not fall until 1215 after a long siege. When the campaigns ended, much of the territory north of the Yellow River was held by the Mongols. The Jin dynasty would remain, increasingly weakened, in the regions south of that river until 1234. But in the final stages of these conquests, Genghis Khan's generals would be concerned, because he had to go west, where the situation was getting complicated. The Khan of the Naimans, Kuklung, with his loyal followers, had fled the Mongols and taken refuge in the Karakitai Khanate, and in 1211 took power, displacing the previous rulers. The opposition to this new government called the Mongols to their aid. The Mongol general Yesugei invaded and occupied the Khanate in 1218, killing Kuklung. That occupation put the Mongol Empire in direct contact with the Khwarezm, a Muslim state ruled by Muhammad II. The motive or pretext for the war was that a caravan in the service of the Mongols was annihilated in the city of Otrar on suspicion of espionage, which led to the conflict. Here too, local resistance was met, and the Mongols, as with the Jin Empire, used devastation and extermination as weapons of war. They razed cities, killing all of the inhabitants and ravaging fields, even destroying irrigation systems. For example, in Samarkand, an important city of the Silk Road, they killed all its inhabitants and stacked their heads in skull towers. The Khwarezmian Empire was destroyed, and many of its provinces became part of the Mongol Empire, although, as with the Jin Empire, various territories continued to resist the invaders for years. But this invasion opened Europe and Syria to the Mongols, even before they had firmly conquered very much of the Khwarezmian territory. In 1221, the Mongol armies crossed the Caucasus, and they had entered the kingdom of Georgia by 1222. The Georgians faced them, and, despite some initial victories, bore the brunt of the invaders. But they were not annihilated, because the Mongols pushed on to the shores of the Black Sea, where they hoped to find richer lands and cities. There, they utterly defeated a great alliance made up of Cumans, Alans, Bulgarians, and Khazars. In 1223, the Cumans, also called Polovtsians, allied themselves with the Prince of Kiev, Mstislav the Brave, who turned to other princes to stop the Mongol invasion. They wanted to negotiate with the Russians, who responded by killing the ambassadors, which then ignited the wrath of the Mongols. In May of that year, the army of the Russian princes and the Cuman Khan defeated the Mongols by the river Dnieper and retreated to the river Kalcha. There, another great battle took place, this time utterly catastrophic for the Allies, as most of their men died in combat and the survivors were tortured and executed by the victors. No less than 3 Russian princes suffered this last fate, and the others fell in struggle. The only one who managed to escape was Mstislav the Brave of Kiev. However, despite such a great victory, Genghis Khan ordered his army to return east as they were needed there, because the Mongol Empire had a score to settle with the Tayichiuds of Zhizha. When he had gone to war against the Khwarezmian Empire, he demanded their support, but they had refused him, claiming that the Mongols already had enough troops, and they began to set up alliances with the Jin and the Song. So, in 1225, having liquidated the power of the Khwarezmian Empire, Genghis Khan invaded Zhizha, conquering one city after another. They used their signature tactics. Those populations that would not surrender were destroyed, and their inhabitants exterminated. By 1226, Zhizha's second largest city, Wuwei, had already surrendered to the Mongols, and the invaders were a few kilometers from the capital, Yinchuan. Later that year, the Tayichiuds attempted a definitive counterattack with a huge army. The Great Battle of the Yellow River ensued, with victory going to the Mongols. The Tayichiuds are said to have lost 300,000 warriors on the battlefield. In 1227, the Mongols surrounded Yinchuan while attacking the Jin. The siege lasted for months, and just when the city was negotiating its surrender, Genghis Khan set out to strike the Jin Empire down once and for all. However, in August of that year, Genghis Khan died suddenly. According to the more popular version, his death was due to a fall from his horse. His death was kept secret so as not to compromise military operations. When Yinchuan surrendered, the Mongols executed the Tayichiud king and his family, exterminated the population, and utterly destroyed the entire city. Genghis Khan's body was sent to his native Mongolia. To preserve the secret of its location, all the slaves who built its tomb were killed. Then, in turn, the soldiers who had executed the slaves were also killed. Genghis Khan's grave has never been found, and there are only hypotheses as to its whereabouts.
The most accepted theory is that his remains are in the territory called the Great Taboo, where Burkhan Khaldun Mountain is located.